Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries.
This is the Northumberland Strait. For those on the shores of Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick, this body of water serves as the backdrop for one of Canada's most consistent maritime mysteries. If we plot the sightings recorded over the last 2 centuries, they cluster with remarkable precision. This isn't a vague regional legend. It is a localized phenomenon tethered to this specific stretch of water. The morphology of the sightings is nearly identical every time. Observers describe a tall sailing vessel, a schooner with 3 or 4 masts and pure white sails, but the ship appears in a state of catastrophe. The reports describe the vessel as being completely engulfed in brilliant white and gold flames, seemingly burning from truck to keel, yet it never sinks or reduces to ash. 2 behavioral rules govern the encounter. The ship almost exclusively appears before the arrival of a northeast wind, and it remains unreachable. If an observer attempts to close the distance, the vessel vanishes. The sheer frequency and consistency of these reports suggest we are not looking at a random haunting, but a predictable event tied to the environment. To understand the ship, we have to look past the ghost stories and treat the strait as a forensic site. By stripping away the folklore, we can begin to analyze the phantom as a problem of atmospheric physics, one where the environment itself provides the light, the heat, and the stage. In 1900, a group of sailors in Charlottetown Harbour spotted the burning masts and launched a rowboat, convinced they were witnessing a genuine nautical disaster. This chart shows their intercept vector. As the rowboat approached the reported coordinates, the distance didn't close. Instead, the ship simply dissipated, leaving the sailors in an empty sea. This vanishing act hasn't changed in 100 years. In October 2008, separate witnesses in Tatamagouche Bay, Matthew Giguere and Melvin Langegill, tracked the same ship as it moved across the water. Giguere's description of a bright white and gold ship confirms that the visual signature reported in the 21st century is identical to the one reported in the 19th. Local accounts often describe a specific breakdown. The ship appears to sink, splits into 3 spheres of fire, and reforms into a solid hull to repeat the cycle. This cycle, vanishing upon approach and splitting into geometric shapes, is the signature of an optical illusion reaching its limit. It suggests we are looking at light being manipulated by the atmosphere. The primary candidate for this manipulation is the Fata Morgana. Here, along the horizon, you can see the atmosphere actively warping and stretching the shape of the distant land. Cold air gets trapped against the water, with warmer air above it. Light from a boat beyond the horizon travels upward, hits the boundary, and bends down toward the shore. Our eyes assume light travels straight, so this refraction stretches the light vertically, creating the illusion of tall masts. If the air layers shift or the observer changes position, the refracted image splinters. This explains why witnesses report the ship shattering into fireballs before fusing back together. This also explains the vanishing in Charlottetown. By rowing toward the illusion, the sailors moved out of the specific viewing window where the light was being refracted. They quite literally rode underneath the mirage. Thermodynamics can explain the shape and the vanishing, but the legend insists on one more detail. The ship is on fire. To solve that, we have to look at the electricity in the air. In 1905, scientist William Francis Genung proposed that the flames weren't an illusion at all, but a natural electrical discharge. He identified the phenomenon as St. Elmo's fire. Despite the name, it involves no actual combustion. It is a coronal discharge of plasma. During a storm, a high-voltage differential builds between the clouds and the sea. The electric field concentrates at pointed objects, ionizing the air and creating a glowing field of plasma. From a distance, this ionized air looks like a roaring white or gold fire. It illuminates the rigging and sails without ever consuming the wood. Both the Fata Morgana and St. Elmo's fire are triggered by the same variable, that northeast wind mentioned in the folklore. Northeast winds indicate incoming severe storm fronts. These systems produce both the dramatic temperature inversions needed for mirages and the electrical charge needed for plasma. The warning of a storm isn't a supernatural prediction. The storm itself is the engine, generating the lights and the mirage as it approaches. If the physics explain the lights, the history explains the interpretation. Why does every witness see a burning ship instead of just a distorted light? The residents of the strait have a long history of maritime disaster to draw from. One possible blueprint is the Young Teazer, a privateer schooner that was famously lost to a fire in its cargo hold during the War of 1812. Other localized traumas include lost emigrant ships from Scotland and pirate vessels that disappeared in storms, creating a shared vocabulary of tragedy. Material confirmation of these disasters remains preserved on the seafloor. In 2015, the Canadian Hydrographic Service mapped a 60-meter wreck in Pictou Harbour. The wreck sits upright in the silt, featuring large wooden propellers and clear signs of severe fire damage. These actual shipwrecks provided the mental model. When people saw confusing atmospheric lights, they interpreted them through the lens of the real ships they knew were burning in those waters. Over 2 centuries, these raw observations of light and shipwrecks merged into a single, unified cultural canon. Modern media eventually standardized the myth. Lenny Gallant's 1988 song, Tales of the Phantom Ship, codified the specific visual parameters for a modern audience. Lyrics describing a tall ship all aflame from truck to keel ensure that when modern observers look at the water, they already know what they are expected to see. This process was institutionalized in 2014 when Canada Post issued a stamp featuring the Phantom Ship as part of a series on Canadian ghost stories. This official recognition ensures the legend will persist. Future atmospheric anomalies in the strait will continue to be processed through this specific historical filter. The witnesses in the Maritimes aren't imagining things. They are observing real physics, refracted light and ionized air, that happens to mimic the specific disasters that once defined these shores. The ghost ship of the Northumberland Strait is a rare forensic intersection, a 200-year-old mirror reflecting the region's unique atmosphere, its tragic history, and the human need to find a story in the light.